Sophia was 8 years old and weighed 48 pounds when she should have weighed 61. Her pink dress had a large hole in the left sleeve. There was a dried chocolate stain on the collar knot from the chocolate she ate, but from what her father spilled on her while he screamed. It was Tuesday afternoon, a parking lot filled with black and red Harley-Davidson motorcycles. 67 bikers from the Iron Wolves MC were there for their monthly charity event. They were handing out food, clothes, and money to desperate families. Sophia was crossing the parking lot alone. Her father, Richard Ashford III, a billionaire CEO, had brought her to show people he cared about charity. He'd left her alone for 10 minutes while he took selfies for Instagram. Sophia saw the dog first. A huge black and tan German shepherd with eyes that seemed to understand everything. It was tied to a leather leash near a red and black Harley-Davidson. A symbol of a skull and wings was tooled into the leather. Sophia stopped walking. The dog lifted its head. She whispered something no one could hear from a distance, just 3 words. And as she whispered, she slowly raised her right hand. She made a specific sign, a sign her body had learned to make when she was in extreme fear. The dog took off running. It didn't run to attack. It ran straight to a gigantic man covered in tattoos, wearing a black leather jacket with the words Iron Wolves MC on the back, a gold skull above the word President. Everything changed in the next 20 minutes. Big Tank saw Shadow running toward him with an urgency he had never seen before. Tank was Marcus Sullivan, 48 years old, 6'4", 286 pounds of muscle covered in tattoos. He had led the Iron Wolves MC for 23 years. He had knife scars on his chest, skull tattoos on his shoulders. A full wolf symbol covered his neck up to his jawline. When Shadow reached him, whining and breathing heavily, Tank knew something was very wrong. "Easy, boy," Tank said, scratching behind Shadow's black ears. "What happened?" Shadow turned and ran right back where he came from. Tank followed, and there was Sophia. She was standing alone near the bikes, her eyes red but tearless, that look a kid gets when they've cried so much they can't cry anymore. Her dress was dirty. One side of her mouth had a small red sore, as if someone had angrily yanked her cheek. Tank knelt, not slowly, not with hesitation. He just dropped to one knee to get on the girl's eye level. "Hi, sweetheart," he said, his voice deep and gravelly but gentle. "My name is Marcus. People call me Tank." Sophia didn't answer. She just stared at him. "Shadow here came and got me. He's very smart, very protective." Tank pointed to the dog. "He only does that when someone really needs help." Sophia whispered something so quiet Tank almost missed it. "Sorry, sweetheart." "Can you say that again?" My name is Sophia," she said, trembling. Her voice was fragile, like brittle paper. "Sophia, that's a pretty name." Tank smiled, but his eyes turned serious immediately. "Sophia, are you okay? Are you hurt?" Sophia looked down at her hands. Her fingers were red in spots, as if someone had squeezed them too hard. "My father? My father said I have to be perfect today, for the pictures, so people will think he's a good man." Tank felt his jaw clench. "Where did you come from, Sophia? That dress? Did you fall?" "My father ripped it yesterday when I asked for food. He said if I ate more, he'd have to pay for more things. And today he said the hole gave the dress character, that people like poor kids more." Tank took a deep breath. He mentally counted to 5. He had seen abuse before, many times, but something about Sophia, about her smallness, about how her eyes searched for safety but didn't expect to find it, triggered something animalistic inside him. "Sophia, how long has it been since you ate anything real?" Tank asked. Sophia thought. 3 days, just tap water and some dry bread yesterday. Big Tank yelled out to the whole group, "Hey, everyone over here, now!" 67 bikers turned their heads at the same time. It wasn't common for Tank to yell like that. In 23 years leading the Iron Wolves MC, he yelled to organize serious operations, to resolve conflicts, to protect members. He had never yelled for a child. But here he was. The bikers moved like a single organism, walking between the charity tables, leaving boxes of food, handing off cash. 67 pairs of heavy boots hit the parking lot pavement. They formed a semicircle around Sophia and Tank. Sophia saw the jackets, the symbols, the skulls and wings, the tattoos, the serious faces. She shrank even smaller. "You're safe, Sophia," Tank said, placing a giant hand gently on her shoulder. "These are my brothers. Everyone here protects kids, always." One of the biker soldier, maybe 60 with gray hair, pulled back in a ponytail, knelt too. "Hey, little one." "I'm Doc. I'm a paramedic. Are you hurt anywhere?" Sophia pointed to her mouth. Doc examined her gently. He opened a backpack he was carrying and took out an anti-inflammatory gel. "This will sting a little, but then it'll hurt less," Doc said, applying it carefully. Another biker younger, maybe 35, with a laptop under his arm, approached Tank and whispered something. Tank nodded. "Sophia, this is my brother Raven. He's going to ask some questions to better understand your situation. Is that okay?" Sophia took a deep breath. Her whole body was shaking. "Your father—" "Where is he now?" Raven asked, opening the laptop. "Near the entrance, taking pictures. He said he'd be back in 10 minutes. He said if I left the spot where he left me, He what?" Tank asked, his voice growing even deeper. "He said I wouldn't eat for a week." Tank closed his eyes. He breathed. He opened them again. "Guys," Tank said to the whole group, his voice calm, but with an edge of determination they all knew well. "We need a few things. First, Raven, can you find this father's abuse history online?" "Anything?" "Already on it," Raven replied, typing quickly. "Second, Doc, can you check Sophia completely? Any internal injuries she might not be mentioning out of fear?" Doc nodded. "Third, Diesel, you're going to wait over there by the entrance. When her father shows up, you take a picture with your smartphone, discreetly. We need every image of him for later." Diesel, one of the biggest guys in the group with a face covered in scars, smiled. "With pleasure, Tank." Tank turned back to Sophia. "Sophia, do you know your father's full name?" "Richard Ashford III. He's the CEO of a big company. He always talks about how much money he has, how much power he has." "Do you have a mother?" Tank asked. Sophia's eyes turned even redder. "She died when I was 4. My father said it was her fault for being weak. He said, I'm like her, that if I don't stay strong, I'll die weak too." Tank took another deep breath. His entire face transformed. Not with rage, something worse. Pure determination. "Sophia, you are safe now. You are with us. If you believe children deserve real protection, not just words, subscribe to this channel now. Turn on notifications, because stories like Sophia's need to be told, and villains like Richard Ashford III need to be exposed. Share this video with someone you love, because the world needs to know that not all victims are alone." Raven typed like a man possessed. His laptop was connected to a hotspot from one of the club members. Raven had been a professional hacker. Before joining the Iron Wolves, a part of his history he preferred not to discuss. But when it came to protecting someone, his old skills came back naturally. "Found him," Raven said after 6 minutes. "Richard Ashford III, CEO of Ashford Capital Management, $340 million portfolio. Divorced his first wife in 2015. 3 workplace lawsuits for sexual harassment. A 2019 child welfare report that was mysteriously closed." Tank read every line. "He paid for that closure," Tank said, not as a question. "Definitely," Raven confirmed. "There are transfers of $50,000 to a retired judge exactly 1 week after the report was opened." Doc was still examining Sophia in a private room that one of the parking lot cafes had provided. Tank could see her through the window, checking her lungs with a stethoscope, asking Sophia to take deep breaths. Sophia was eating a sandwich. Slowly, afraid someone would ask her to stop. Shadow lay beside her, his head resting in her lap. "There's more," Raven continued, maximizing another tab. "Income records. Sophia has a $5 million trust fund left by her mother. Richard is the administrator until Sophia turns 18. Tank took a deep breath. So he's letting a child starve while she has $5 million in accounts? Exactly. And there's more. Credit card records show he uses her for corporate events, pays for her to appear in photos with him. He's practically renting her out as an accessory. One of the club's veteran members, named Hammer, approached Tank. "We need to talk about next steps," said Hammer, 62, ex-military, with combat boots tattooed on his neck. "If we take this kid, he'll call the cops. It could get complicated." Tank nodded. "That's why we're going to do this right. We go to the police first, with solid evidence." "Tank, you know how the police work," Hammer said. "He probably has contacts there." "Then we go above the police," Tank replied. "Raven, how much can you put on the internet about Richard Ashford? Documented, provable, not just allegations." Raven smiled. "I can put everything: divorce records, workplace lawsuits, financial records, child welfare reports, letters from ex-employees describing how he touched them without consent. All of this is public information. It's just never been compiled and amplified before." "How long?" Tank asked. 3 hours. I create a complete document with sources with timestamps. I send it to major journalists, to influencers who cover child abuse, to contacts I have in state child welfare departments. Tank turned to the rest of the group. "Guys, listen up. Sophia doesn't leave our side until there is legal custody and protection. Doc, can you fully examine and document every injury? Everything needs photography, dates, measurements." "Already doing it," Doc replied from the private room, holding up a professional camera. 3 injuries documented: severe malnutrition, old scars. Everything will be dated and documented. "Diesel," Tank called. "Is the father still here?" "Yep, just took more selfies. He's playing on his phone, waiting for Sophia to come back like clockwork." Tank checked his watch. "He said he'd be back in 10 minutes. It's been 12. He's going to start getting nervous soon." As they spoke, Raven kept typing. His fingers flew across the keyboard with the speed of someone who had spent decades in front of screens. "Sending," Raven announced after 45 minutes. 15 major journalists have the file. 8 child protection influencers, 3 state welfare departments, all with complete documentation, names, dates, account numbers. "How long until it starts to break?" Tank asked. 2 hours, maybe less. Once one major media outlet picks it up, the others all follow. Tank walked to the private room where Sophia was. The girl had eaten half the sandwich. There was apple juice at the corner of her mouth. For the first time since Tank had met her, she didn't seem to be shaking. "Sophia, are you okay?" Tank asked, kneeling again. "Better," Sophia replied softly. "I'm going to have to go back to him, right?" Tank took her small hand. "No, never again. You're staying with us, safely. And your father is going to get exactly what he deserves." Richard Ashford III was 52 years old and had never heard the word no in his adult life. His parents were rich. His grandparents were richer. He inherited $80 million at 25 and turned it into $340 million through questionable investments and even more questionable political connections. He had the kind of face that seemed carved to look confident. Square jaw, piercing blue eyes, impeccably cut gray hair. He wore an $8,000 Tom Ford suit, handmade Italian shoes, and a Rolex watch that cost more than most houses. But beneath the expensive clothes and the handsome face was a deep emptiness. Richard was a man who had never loved anyone but himself. His first wife, Catherine, had left him in 2015 after discovering he had sexually assaulted her assistant. She took Sophia, then 3 years old, but later died of cancer in 2019. Richard won custody through a judge whose campaign he had financially contributed to. Since then, Sophia was an asset, not a daughter, an asset. She was useful for his public image. Dedicated family man. CEO who balances business and fatherhood. He took her to corporate events, to charity dinners, to business cocktail parties where she would stand in a pretty dress while he introduced her to colleagues. "My daughter Sophia, so smart, so dedicated." And at home, Sophia ate when he remembered, slept when he allowed it, spoke when he asked questions. When she asked about food, he told her rich children shouldn't be fragile. When she asked about her mother, he changed the subject. When she cried at night, he locked her bedroom door and played loud music. Richard had met the judge who helped close the child welfare report at a cocktail party in 2019. He had discreetly transferred $50,000. The judge had been useful. There were never again any welfare visits. Richard also had contacts in the police force. His best friend was the head lieutenant of the juvenile department. They played golf together. They did business together. If Sophia tried to say anything, she would simply disappear into the system, or she would be dismissed as a problem child looking for attention. At least, that's what Richard believed. He was checking his Rolex now in the charity event parking lot. His daughter had been missing for 15 minutes. This irritated him. She was supposed to be by his side for the photos with the charities to show how much he cared. Richard walked among the charity tables, searching. He saw bikers everywhere. He despised them. Failed men who lacked the mental capacity for business, who compensated for their intellectual weakness with muscles and cheap tattoos. He was about to leave when he saw Sophia in a private room, eating a sandwich next to a gigantic dog, next to Big Tank. Richard recognized Tank from a newspaper article he had read years ago. Biker accused of drug trafficking charges dropped due to lack of evidence. A criminal. His daughter was with a criminal. Richard felt the rage rising. He walked toward the door. Richard threw open the door to the private room. "Sophia! Get out here now!" he yelled, his voice sharp as glass. Sophia jumped, dropping half her sandwich. Tank didn't move. "You must be the father," Tank said, remaining knelt near Sophia. His voice was calm. "Lethal. I am Richard Ashford, and you are with my daughter. Get out of the way, or I'm calling the police." Tank rose slowly to his feet. At 6'4" and 286 pounds of muscle, Tank was visually terrifying. But it wasn't the height that scared Richard. It was something in Tank's eyes, a kind of clarity that suggested he had already resolved the outcome of this conversation long ago. "Your daughter has severe malnutrition," Tank said, his tone completely clinical. "Documented injuries, old scars. She hasn't eaten properly in 3 days." "That is my business," Richard snapped, grabbing Sophia's arm. "We're leaving." Sophia whimpered in pain as he pulled her. "Let go of her arm," Tank said. "No, and if you try to stop me, I will sue you for kidnapping." Tank stepped closer. Richard Ashford III, CEO of Ashford Capital Management, $340 million portfolio. Divorced in 2015 from Catherine Ashford after you sexually assaulted her. 3 workplace lawsuits for sexual harassment. A child welfare report closed in 2019 after you transferred $50,000 to Judge Harold Mitchell. Richard turned pale. Who told you this?" "Nobody told me. It's all publicly available, just compiled, and as we speak, it's being sent to every major journalist on the East Coast." Richard let go of Sophia. "You wouldn't do that," he said, but his voice had lost its certainty. "Already did," Tank replied. "An hour ago. With complete documentation, photos of Sophia, her history, everything." Richard ran out of the room. He grabbed his iPhone. He opened his Twitter. He saw he had 47 new mentions. He opened Google. He typed his name. The results popped up. Billionaire CEO. Accused of child abuse. Documents show systematic neglect. Richard Ashford III, from financial success to child predator. Hidden abuse report exposes flawed judicial system. CEO's daughter found malnourished at charity event. Richard felt the floor disappear beneath his feet. His phone started ringing. All of his phones, personal smartphone, business smartphone, the landline he had in the car, all ringing at the same time. He had 42 missed calls, 148 emails, 1,200 Twitter mentions. His photo was trending with the hashtag #billionaireabuser. Richard ran back to the private room. "What did you do?" he screamed at Tank, his face red with rage. "I exposed you," Tank replied simply. The door to the private room opened. 2 police officers entered. Not his friends, 2 officers he had never seen before, young, serious, with the determination of someone who had just received a direct order from their superiors. "Richard Ashford III?" asked the first officer, a man with black hair and a scar on his face. "Yes. What do you want?" "You are under arrest for aggravated child neglect, child abuse, and welfare fraud. You have the right to remain silent." Richard tried to run. He just turned and ran. He managed to reach the entrance door of the parking lot. He saw 67 bikers standing, in 2 lines, forming a corridor. All standing, all silent, all looking at him. He stopped. The 2 officers caught up to him. They forced him to his knees on the asphalt. The handcuffs flashed in the sun. 48 hours later. Richard Ashford III was in a holding cell awaiting trial. Bail had been denied. The judge had read the documents compiled by the Iron Wolves MC and decided Richard was a flight risk. With $340 million, it was easy to disappear. The numbers were brutal. Criminal charges, 7. Aggravated child neglect with a minimum sentence of 5 years. Child abuse with a minimum sentence of 10 years. Welfare system fraud with a 3-year sentence. Sexual assault with the 2015 case reopened and an additional 8-year sentence. Total estimated sentence, 26 years in prison. But that was just the beginning. Ashford Capital Management lost $180 million in investments as corporate clients withdrew their accounts after reading about the abuse. His board members resigned en masse. 3 negligence lawsuits were filed by families who discovered he had invested their funds in questionable schemes. His $15 million penthouse in Manhattan was mortgaged to pay lawyers. His $2.8 million Ferrari was seized. Bank accounts frozen. $47 million. His name was a trending topic for 72 hours. 8 million people saw the document compiled by the Iron Wolves MC. Billionaire abuser generated 45 million impressions. Universities revoked awards in his name. Country clubs expelled him. Lifelong friends blocked him on social media and returned reporters' calls confirming abuse stories he had never faced. Judge Harold Mitchell, who had closed the original child welfare report in 2019, was being investigated for fraud. The $50,000 transfers were traced. His career was over. He would be prosecuted alongside Richard. On the second day of detention, Richard tried to commit suicide. He was stopped by prison guards, placed on suicide watch. In a suicide-proof cell, no ropes, no way to harm himself. Alone. Completely alone. No one visited him. None of his friends answered his calls. His personal assistant, whom he had known for 20 years, gave an interview to a reporter describing how he had touched her friends without consent. On the day of the detention hearing, 12 more women showed up with stories: sexual harassment, assault, coercion, all with dates, all with witnesses, all who had remained silent for fear of his political connections and financial power. The judge heard everything and increased the charges. Now there were 9 charges. Total estimated sentence: 34 years. Sophia stood in front of a mirror. She was 9 years old now. She weighed 70 pounds, still a little underweight, but healthy. Her dress was new, blue, no holes. Picked out by herself at a store with Big Tank and Doc. Her face had changed, not just because it was fuller, but because the sadness had left her eyes. In its place was something new: safety. Sophia now lived in a house on the outskirts of New Jersey, owned by the Iron Wolves MC, a 3-story house that Tank had bought specifically to be a shelter for at-risk children. Sophia had her own room, with curtains she chose, with a soft bed, with toys she had never had. Shadow slept beside her every night. For the first time in her life, Sophia had friends. There were 2 other children in the house: Marcus, 10, whose father had been arrested for drug trafficking, and Emma, 7, whose mother had died of an overdose. The 3 children shared the large kitchen. They cooked together, they ate together, they laughed together. Doc had visited the house 12 times in these 6 months. He examined Sophia. He ensured she was recovering not just physically, but psychologically. "She's recovering very well," Doc had told Tank. "The kid is resilient. With safety and proper food and love, she's going to be fine." Tank had cried. Raven the hacker was now the house's teacher. He taught the kids about technology, about how to protect themselves online, about how legal processes work. "You need to know how the world works," Raven would tell Sophia, "so you are never a victim again." Hammer, the ex-military man, was the coach. He taught the children basic self-defense, not to attack, but to defend. "You need to know that your body is your own," Hammer would say, teaching Sophia how to take an attacker to the ground. "No one touches you without permission." Today was special. It was the day of Richard Ashford III's sentencing. Tank was taking her to the courthouse. Sophia wanted to be there, not for revenge, but for closure. "Are you sure?" Tank asked that morning, while Sophia ate cereal with milk, her favorite food now. Her father had never let her have cereal. "It will be hard." "Yes, I'm sure," Sophia replied. In the courtroom, Sophia sat in the victim's gallery. Beside her was Tank. In front of her, in a bulletproof glass box, was Richard Ashford III. He looked nothing like the man Sophia knew. His hair was gray now, not the distinguished kind, but the kind that comes from months of stress and insomnia. His face was thin, his eyes were empty. He saw Sophia, and for the first time in his life, Richard Ashford III felt true shame. The judge read the sentence. "Richard Ashford III, you are convicted on 9 counts of child abuse, aggravated sexual harassment, sexual assault, welfare fraud, and perjury." The sentence of this court is 34 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole for 28 years. Furthermore, all your assets will be liquidated and used to compensate your victims. The $5 million account left to Sophia Ashford by her mother will be fully restored under state guardianship until she turns 18. The gavel fell. Richard began to cry. Not tears of regret, tears of a frightened child who finally understands that consequences are real. He was led away. Sophia didn't feel relief exactly, just closure. Tank put his hand on her shoulder. "Come on, sweetheart, let's go home." On the way back to the house, Tank stopped at an ice cream shop. Sophia chose strawberry, topping with chocolate sprinkles. She licked it as she watched the street go by. Her life had changed completely in 6 months, from a hungry, hurt, scared girl to a healthy, safe, loved girl. Do you know what the most interesting thing about appearances is? They deceive everyone. People see a biker with tattoos and muscles and assume dangerous, criminal, bad. But what those people don't see is the heart. They see a thin child in torn clothes and assume she's weak, she won't make it, she'll grow up broken. But what those people don't see is the resilience. And people see a rich man in an expensive suit driving an expensive car and assume he's successful, he's respectable, he's a good person. But what those people don't see is the emptiness. In this world, we learn to judge by what we see, by labels, by clothes, by the amount of money in a bank account. But the truth is, family isn't defined by DNA. Family is defined by who is there when everything falls apart, who feeds you when you're hungry, who protects you when you're scared, who loves you when you don't believe you deserve love. Sophia Ashford was born into wealth, but she was poor in love. Today she lives in a simple house, but she is rich in family. Because in the end, the most important thing a human being can have isn't money, it's not power, it's not reputation, it's the feeling of being safe, of being protected, of knowing that someone loves you exactly as you are. So the next time you see a biker, don't assume, don't judge, because appearances lie. But hearts always speak the truth. and sometimes the truest hearts beat inside the chests that look the scariest.